He thought he'd agreed to take in a single Apache bride. He had no idea the bargain would drop 3 Apache sisters on his doorstep. Before we get into it, you already know the drill. This is a Western love story. So settle in and picture the prairie at sundown. Red Hail slammed the last fence post into the hard-packed earth and let the hammer hang loose at his side. His shoulders burned from a full day's work, and his palms felt like they'd been sanded raw by wood and wire. The light was slipping fast. The sky, once bright, had faded to that washed-out purple that comes right before night swallows everything. The range had gone quiet. In the far pen, cattle shifted and snorted softly, the only movement in a world that seemed to be holding its breath. The iron head of the hammer clicked as it cooled in his grip, dust drifted off his shirt sleeves when he exhaled. Red didn't expect anyone. Nobody rode this far out unless they were lost, desperate, or bringing trouble. He started toward the gate, already thinking about the coffee waiting on his stove and the silence he clung to like a blanket. Most nights, that quiet meant more to him than supper. Just the creak of the wind, the steady tick of cooling metal, and his own thoughts for company. He got 3 steps before he froze. There, just beyond the wooden gate, stood 3 women. They weren't close enough to be casual visitors, but not so far that they hadn't chosen this exact distance on purpose. Near enough to speak if he called out, far enough to run if he reached for the wrong thing. His heartbeat tightened in his chest. Red didn't move right away. Old instincts woke up. He swept his eyes across the horizon first, looking for riders, shadows. The hint of someone waiting behind them, nothing. Just open field. Flat and still in the fading light. His hands settled near his holster. More from reflex than threat. The women didn't speak. Their clothes were in rough shape fabric, thinned and torn, hems ragged from miles of walking. Dust coated their hair, their cheeks, the lines of their throats. They looked like they'd been driven across half the territory with no chance to stop. Like the open land itself made them nervous now. The oldest stood slightly in front of the other 2, chin up even though exhaustion pulled at her eyes. Her dress was ripped across the chest, and she held it together with one hand not to draw attention, but to hang on to what dignity she had left. She stood like a shield, feet braced, body angled just enough to put herself between him and the girls behind her. The second sister faced him with her body turned sideways, ready to pivot either way. Her fists hovered near her ribs, not fully raised, but close. Her knuckles trembled, but she held the stance anyway. The youngest pressed herself against their backs, fingers tangled in the older women's sleeves. Her breath came fast, her dress ripped at the shoulder, hair snared in snarls around her face. Tear tracks had dried on her cheeks, and she was too tired to pretend she wasn't scared. Red broke the silence first, voice level. "You lost." The eldest shook her head once. When she spoke, her English was careful and deliberate. "We come here. You say you take wife." Red blinked. Heat flickered in his chest, not anger, but a jolt of alarm. Memory snapped into place. Weeks earlier, he'd passed a small group of riders on the trail, traders. They'd asked if he'd consider taking in a woman who needed safe ground. One woman. A straightforward arrangement. She'd help with cooking, chores, the ranch work he couldn't cover alone. He'd provide protection and a roof. He had agreed. One woman. "Not 3. I said I'd take one person," Red answered slowly. "Not 3. Fear shot across the youngest girl's face like a shadow hitting water. The middle sister's jaw locked. The eldest didn't flinch, but something in her eyes drew tight as if this was exactly the kind of disappointment she'd expected from life, yet had dared to hope for more. "We stay together," she said quietly. "We not leave each other." Red's breathing eased, but his chest felt heavier. He studied them properly now. Faint bruises along collarbones, red marks around their wrists where rope or fists had held it tight. Dirt rubbed into their skin in places that spoke of struggle, not work. These weren't drifters looking for a free meal. They were survivors. And not because someone saved them, because they refused to lie down and die. He'd worn a uniform once, long ago, before the war and the frontier had stripped any shine off the idea of sides. He'd come out here afterward because he wanted quiet land, a place where he didn't have to watch anyone else get hurt or decide who lived and who didn't. He wanted the kind of life where the only Things he had to shoot at were coyotes and wolves after the herd, but as he faced these 3 women, he recognized a hard truth. If he turned them away, he might as well ride them straight into a noose himself. Out here, alone and hunted, they wouldn't last a day. Whoever was after them would find them. He'd hear the story in town later over cheap whiskey, and then he'd carry that weight with the others he already dragged behind him. He was tired of adding to that pile. Red shifted his stance, drew in a slow breath, and made his choice. "You hungry?" he asked. The youngest answered before she could stop herself. She nodded, a tiny sound escaping her throat, barely a word, more like a broken breath. "Barn," Red said, jerking his chin toward the outbuilding. "It's warm. Water pumps inside. I'll bring blankets." The eldest's throat worked as she swallowed. Relief and disbelief collided in her face, like she didn't know which one to trust. "Thank you," she murmured. They followed him across the yard, their steps dragging. Their formation never broke, the eldest walking first, the middle angled as a guard, the youngest clinging to both, trying not to stumble. Inside the barn, dim lantern light brushed over hay bales and beams. The horses shifted and snorted, catching the scent of strangers. Straw whispered under their boots. The sisters bunched up along the wall, never more than an arm's length apart. Red set a stack of blankets on a bale. "My name's Red Hale," he said. The eldest dipped her chin. "Asha," she pointed slightly toward the sharp-eyed one. "Talia," then to the youngest. "Know me?" Red nodded once. "You're safe here for the night. Tomorrow we'll figure the rest." Talia searched his face like she was checking each word for cracks. Asha drew herself up a little taller and gave a small nod, the kind you give when you're willing to rest, but not surrender. Nomi wrapped a blanket tight around her shoulders and whispered something in her own language. It sounded like a plea or a promise, maybe both. Red stepped back toward the door. He paused with his hand on the frame and looked over his shoulder. Asha met his gaze head-on. There was no begging in her eyes, no collapse, no brokenness. Just a woman who refused to stop breathing. He tipped his head once, then closed the barn door behind him. Red crossed the yard alone, boots crunching softly in the frost-crusted dirt. The sky had lost nearly all its color now, leaving only a thin gray wash over the land. His cabin window glowed faintly, a square of yellow in all that empty dark. Inside, the heat wrapped around him like a thick coat. The coffee pot still sat on the stove, but he didn't pour a cup. Instead, he dropped onto the chair at the table and stared at his hands, scarred knuckles resting on worn wood. 3 women in his barn. A promise he hadn't fully thought through. A responsibility he'd never asked for. He'd built this life simple on purpose: fence lines, cattle, chores, quiet. Days that blended together so he didn't have to remember the louder ones from his past. No guests, no expectations. No one depending on him for more than a handshake and a fair trade. Now, whether he wanted it or not, that changed. He could still feel the way Nomi's eyes had tracked his every move, caught between hope and fear. The set of Talia's shoulders, ready to go down swinging if he twitched wrong. Asha standing like a wall, tired and unbending. Red rubbed his jaw. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He'd seen enough men chasing glory to last him a lifetime. But he also knew what it looked like when everyone stepped aside and left the weakest to be hunted. He'd been a witness to that too many times. The wind scraped along the cabin walls. The night deepened, stretching wide and cold over the prairie. Red finally moved, stood, and checked the rifle by the door, habit more than worry. The land outside was still and silent, but his mind wasn't. By the time he lay down on his narrow bed, he knew one thing for certain: tomorrow. He couldn't simply pretend nothing had changed. Those 3 women were now part of his story, whether he'd written them into it or not. Sleep came in pieces. Before dawn, frost spidered across the window pane, thin and white, like cracked glass trying to hold back the morning. Red swung his legs out of bed and sat up, the chill biting through the floorboards. His thoughts picked up where they'd left off. Ash's steady eyes, bruises he couldn't unsee, the way they hadn't brought so much as a blanket of their own. He pulled on his boots, cinched his belt, and shrugged into his coat. When he opened the cabin door, the cold hit him like a slap. The sky was still gray, the world not quite awake. Horses shifted in the corral, steam rising from their nostrils. For a second he wondered if the barn would be empty, if fear had driven the sisters out into the night again, back into danger. The barn door creaked. Asha stepped out first, blanket pulled around her shoulders. Her breath puffed past her lips in little clouds. Her hair was mussed from sleep, eyes hollowed with exhaustion, but alert, always alert. Behind her, Nomi peered out, blanket nearly up to her nose, eyes heavy with half-slept dreams. Talia followed, last by choice, gaze sharp, fingers hovering near the thin leather belt at her waist like she was always ready to grab steel. They hesitated, waiting on him, without wanting to look like they were waiting on him. Red nodded toward the cabin. "Come on in." Warmer inside. Talia's brow wrinkled. "We not want burden." She almost spat the word, like it tasted wrong. He kept his expression even. "You wouldn't be here if I thought you were a burden." Asha glanced at Talia, gave a small nod. That was all it took. Together, they walked across the yard, moving slow but in step, Nomi clutching her blanket like armor. Inside, the cabin felt even smaller with 4 people in it. One room, a bed in the corner, a rough table, shelves lined with odds and ends rope, nails, pewter cups, a coffee sack hanging from a hook. The stove crackled low, warming the air. 3 sets of eyes took in everything at once, cataloging exits, weapons, shadows. That was what living in fear did. It turned your mind into a scout, always checking for ambush. Nomi's gaze locked on the pot simmering on the stove, as if hot food was a miracle she didn't trust yet. Red ladled thick oats into 4 bowls and set them on the table with a heel of bread. The sisters hovered until Asha looked at him. He gave a slight nod toward the chairs. They sat as if the wood might vanish beneath them. Asha waited until he picked up his spoon before she lifted hers. Talia didn't take a bite until both her sisters did. Nomi took one mouthful, and the emotion hit her so fast she had to stop. Her hand trembled. A tear slipped loose. She swiped at it quickly, embarrassed to cry over porridge. Red pretended not to see. Dignity mattered more than letting her know he'd noticed. While they ate, he spoke, his voice steady. "I need to understand why you're here. What happened?" Asha's spoon slowed. She set it down carefully and drew a breath. "We belong to man," she said, jaw tight. "Not by our choice. He trade women. He say I go to white husband, but we run before he give me away." Her fingers whitened around the bowl. "He say we worthless, if not bring coin. He try take Nomi back." Her voice dropped. "We fight. We run." Nomi looked down at her hands. Talia's jaw clenched, memories flashing, hands grabbing. Voices shouting, boots kicking dust as they tore free. In the morning light, Red could see fresh bruises on Nomi's arm he'd missed in the barn. Something hot and ugly twisted in his gut. His fists curled at his sides. Asha went on. "Trade man say you agree. Take one. We think. Maybe here we not hunted." Red let out a slow breath. They hadn't come to trick him. They weren't looking for easy shelter. They were running from a man who treated human lives like livestock. And someone, somewhere along the trail, had thrown Red Hale's name into the story like a lifeline. He didn't appreciate being dragged blind into another man's evil, but he understood why they clung to the promise. "Nobody's coming here to take you," he said at last. "Not if I've got anything to say about it." Ash's shoulders loosened just a little. Talia's eyes softened, then sharpened again. Refusing to relax too far, Nomi let out a tiny breath, as if she'd been holding it since she stepped onto his land. Red leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I need to be clear with you. I didn't agree to marry anyone." Asha nodded, meeting his gaze. "We know now. We not ask marriage." Her voice was plain, honest. "We asked to live." That hit him deeper than any vow. She wasn't here to bargain herself away. She wanted safety, air to breathe, a chance to exist without being owned. He respected that more than any desperate promise in a church. "You can stay," he said, "for now, but there are rules. We work, we keep watch, we don't lie to each other. If trouble comes, we face it together." Asha dipped her head, quiet gratitude in the gesture. Talia didn't say a word, but her gaze warmed a fraction. Nomi whispered, "Thank you," voice shaking with relief instead of fear this time. When they finished eating, Red stepped outside to clear his thoughts. The cold cut through him, but it also steadied him. He looked over the open land, the fence lines, the distant ridge where trouble always seemed to start as nothing more than a small blur. He'd come here to disappear into routine, to stop seeing the worst in men, and yet, the worst had pushed 3 women straight into his yard. Maybe that wasn't a curse. Maybe it was the first real thing to happen to him in years. The cabin door opened softly behind him. Asha stepped out, the blanket slipping a little from her shoulders. She didn't come close, just stood beside him with a small gap between them, arms wrapped around herself, scanning the land like she needed to see where her faith was being placed. "You think they come for us?" she asked. Red didn't sugarcoat it. "Men like that usually try, but they won't take you from here." She studied his face for a long, quiet moment. She was looking for empty words and didn't find any. "You strong man," she said finally. "But strong men sometimes choose easy path when danger come." He turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. "You're right, they do." He paused. "I won't." Asha held his gaze, measuring him. "We help," she said. "We work hard. We earn place." Red shook his head. "You don't need to earn safety. You already deserve that. Work's for building something, not paying off your right to live." Something shifted behind her eyes, small, painful, grateful. Talia called from inside, and Asha gave him one last nod before turning back to the cabin. Red stood alone again, watching the pale sun begin to climb. This wasn't the life he planned. But plans didn't mean much out here. The prairie didn't care what a man wanted. It only cared who he chose to be when trouble showed up. And Red Hale knew now, with 3 lives depending on him. There was no going back to the man he'd been before they walked into his yard. Mid-morning light stretched across the prairie in soft, pale streaks. It warmed the dirt but didn't quite lift the heaviness hanging in the air. The scent of coffee lingered inside Red Hale's cabin. But the quiet felt different now, no longer the emptiness he once depended on, but the presence of 3 steady breaths, 3 new rhythms moving under his roof. Red chopped firewood outside the cabin, stacking each piece along the sidewall in tidy rows. Every few strokes of the axe, he found himself glancing toward the barn or the narrow cabin window. He'd lived so long without anyone else around that even small sounds of footstep, a whispered word, pulled his attention like a tug on a line. Inside, the sisters worked with the same silent coordination they'd shown since the moment they arrived. Asha wiped down the table, moving carefully like the wood might crack if treated wrong. Talia ground dried beans with a round stone, arms steady, the rhythm sharp and familiar. Nomi sat near the fire, mending torn dresses with hands that trembled only once in a while, a tremble she always corrected. With a slow breath before continuing, they didn't wait for instructions. They didn't ask what they should do. They simply saw work and moved toward it, as if survival had trained their bodies long before Red ever saw them step across his gate. Standing in the doorway, Red watched them. Quiet, arms folded, gaze steady. Something tightened in his chest, not discomfort, understanding. Their clothes were their only belongings. No bags, no blankets, no keepsakes. Nothing that a person could call mine. They'd run with only what they could grab in a second. He didn't pry into their past. He didn't want to force them to relive it. But the question hung unsaid in the air until Asha finally answered it without him speaking a word. She didn't pause her cleaning as she said, "We have no family left." Talia stopped grinding the beans. Just for a beat, Asha continued, voice lower. "Raid many years ago. Took people, took food, took hope." Her cloth moved across the table again, steady and unshaking. "We survive after. Only we 3. Talia's tone cut in, edged but controlled. "We trade beadwork for corn, skins for cloth. But men take too much. Demand things not theirs." Her jaw set. "We leave again and again." Nomi didn't look up from her stitches, but her voice drifted softly, almost swallowed by the crackling fire. "When we escape, last man, we lose everything." Red nodded once, strong, short, respectful. Words wouldn't fix anything. They didn't need pity. They needed a place that didn't crush them. He cleared his throat. "There's work here, plenty. If you stay, you'll take part in it." Asha straightened. "We know work. We not rest while you labor." Red pointed toward the pasture. Fence wires loose on the backfield. When you've finished eating, I'll show you where. Talia responded with a single nod agreement. Not obedience, Red stepped outside, but before he could grab the tools, something shifted in the distant air. Hoof beats, slow, steady. Coming closer. His spine stiffened. The sisters felt it too. The quiet inside the cabin snapped like a string. Heads lifted. Breathing changed. Fear crawled back up their throats in instinctive waves. A lone rider crested the North Trail, thus rising behind his horse. Not fast, not reckless, but unexpected. Red stepped forward, positioning his body squarely between the cabin and the stranger. His hand hovered near his holster but not on it. Just ready, the rider waved once, loose and casual. Morning, hail. Red recognized the voice. Jeb Carter, a ranch hand from a spread miles away. Young, talkative, nosy, and not always good at minding his business. Jeb pulled up near the fence. Thought I saw smoke last night. Didn't think you took to entertaining company out here. Red kept his face calm. Chimney draft. Had to fix it. Jeb leaned in the saddle, eyes flicking past Red toward the barn. Too curious for his own good. You hear talk in town? Folks say someone's been trading Apache women again. Caused a mess down south. That trouble drift this way? Red's jaw tightened. Controlled. Unreadable. Haven't seen anything like that. Hope not. Jeb shrugged. Sheriff says some men are out looking for runaways. Best keep your rifle nearby. He tapped his hat brim. You take care. Red waited until Jeb turned around and disappeared into the dust before letting out the breath that had been locked in his chest. When he opened the cabin door again, 3 pairs of eyes were fixed on him. Asha stood rigid, one arm hooked slightly in front of her sister's without realizing it. Talia's hand hovered near a knife Red had no idea she'd hidden. Nomi twisted the edge of her dress so tightly the fabric nearly tore. He didn't see you, Red said. Talia exhaled sharply, shoulders dropping an inch. Nomi wiped her palms on her skirt. Asha nodded once, though her breath still came quicker than she meant to show. Red leaned a shoulder against the frame. I don't want guns drawn every time dust rises, but men will come asking sooner or later. We stay smart. We stay steady. Asha lifted her chin. We not run again. Unless must. Red shook his head. We'll make sure it doesn't come to that. Nomi stepped forward, voice small but brave. Why you help? Her eyes were wide, searching. You could send us away. Red's answer came without hesitation. Because I know what it looks like when nobody steps in. And I've done enough watching bad things happen. Ash's expression shifted, something heavy and undefended settling into place. Red picked up the coil of wire and nodded toward the pasture. Eat a little more, then we fix that fence. Work clears the mind better than fear does. Talia smirked, just a shadow of one. We work better than most men. Red allowed himself the faintest grin. We'll see. The prairie rolled wide as they started toward the back pasture. Sagebrush rustled, the wind light but restless. The land wasn't peaceful, not truly. Danger hung somewhere near the edges, unseen but very real. But when Asha, Talia, and Nomi stepped beside him, blankets traded for purpose, fear turning into firm ground under their feet. The air shifted. They weren't 3 fugitives anymore. They were part of this place now, and Red Hale wasn't standing alone on it anymore. The fence line snaked across the back pasture in a long, wavering stretch, sagging in places where storms and wandering cattle had pushed it down over the months. The sun had climbed higher now, running pale gold fingers across the grass and brush. Red carried a coil of wire in one hand, pliers tucked into his belt. His boots sank into the soft dirt with each step. Behind him, Asha and Talia walked steady, carrying posts and tools with practiced balance. Nomi followed just a little slower, clutching a wooden bucket of nails. She was tired, anyone could see it, but she kept moving as if stopping would let fear catch up. Working together wasn't new to them. Red saw it right away. Every movement was instinctive, Asha adjusting her grip so Talia didn't have to ask. Talia watching the ground for soft spots. Nomi shifting the bucket to lighten the weight off her shoulder. They moved like people who had survived by leaning on one another. But today, that instinct held something new underneath it. Not just survival. A small, fragile sense of possibility. Nomi looked up at Red finally, her voice so soft he almost missed it. What do we do here? We never work ranch before. Her cheeks flushed as soon as she asked. Embarrassed to admit uncertainty, Red slowed and looked back at her. You don't need to know everything today. I'll teach you. He pointed toward the broken section ahead. That fence keeps cattle where they belong, and it keeps strangers from walking in. Out here, fences matter. Asha nodded, absorbing the explanation without question. She didn't need the finer details. Structure itself was something she could trust. Talia let out a rough exhale. We do more than fix fence if men come for us. Red's eyes met hers. If someone comes, we deal with it. But we prepare, not panic. Talia lowered her gaze, not surrendering, just accepting leadership from a man she was starting to believe might actually deserve it. They reached the break. Red dropped the tools onto the ground. All right, let's get to it. The morning stretched into steady, muscle-burning work. Red drove posts into the ground with heavy swings, dirt vibrating under each blow. Asha held the wire taut, hands wrapped in cloth strips to keep them from tearing. Talia hammered nails and tightened knots, checking every twist twice. Nomi carried tools back and forth, lips pressed tight in concentration. Whenever one sister faltered, the other stepped in. No pride, no blame, no hesitation. Red watched them and felt a slow shift inside his chest. He'd spent years believing solitude kept him steady. Watching these women work, shoulders squared, breaths even, refusing to fold, made him reevaluate how strong silence really was compared to shared purpose. They tightened the last stretch of wire when a sound broke the quiet. A hoarse, distant, off-tempo from Jeb's, slow but deliberate. Red stiffened. Asha froze with the wire still in her hands. Talia's fingers slid toward the knife she kept hidden under her skirt. Nomi crouched instinctively behind a post, fear showing despite her effort to hide it. Dust rose on the far horizon. A single rider approached, dark coat, wide brim hat, rifle strip tied to the saddle. Not in a rush, not meandering, watching, measuring. Red stepped forward several paces, boots grinding in the dirt as he positioned himself between the man and the sisters. Stay behind me, he murmured without turning around. No one argued. Asha pulled Nomi gently behind her. Talia stood half in front of both, knife already pressed to her thigh. The rider slowed near the fence, lifting two fingers in a greeting that was friendly in tone, but not in his eyes. Morning. The stranger called. Red didn't raise his voice. You lost. The rider's smile twitched. No, sir. Just passing through. His eyes swept over Red, then flicked to the women behind him, then back to calculating for a harmless passerby. Didn't expect company out here. They're helping with work, Red said flatly. The man tipped his hat just a fraction. Strange times. Heard 3 Apache girls went missing down south. Folks are real stirred up. Red stayed still. I hear plenty. Doesn't mean it concerns me. The man's smile thinned. If you see anything unusual, you might want to tell the sheriff. I don't deal in gossip. A long, unspoken challenge hung between them, quiet, heavy, stretching out like wire pulled too tight. Finally, the rider nodded, tugged the reins, and turned his horse away. He rode off at a slow enough pace to show he wasn't scared, but a fast enough pace to show he intended to think about what he'd seen. Red waited until the dust swallowed him. Before he moved at all, Asha released a breath she'd been holding so long her lips trembled. Talia lowered her knife, shoulders ironed hard. Nomi pressed her forehead to the fence post, relief wobbling her knees. Red returned to them, voice even. You didn't move. That mattered. Talia's voice came low, shaking with anger. He knows something, maybe, Red admitted, but he didn't see enough to act. Asha looked toward the horizon, then back at Red. Why he search here? Red answered with the only truth that fit. Because men who think they own people will always look in every direction until someone stops them. Nomi's eyes filled again, not just fear, but the memory of hands grabbing, voices shouting, the terror of being dragged back. Red crouched in front of her. Fear's normal, he said, but don't let it lead you. We stay ready, not scared. Nomi gave a small nod. Talia crossed her arms, chewing down her fury. Asha studied Red with a deeper intensity now, not checking if he was lying, but deciding if this land could be theirs and more than just hiding, she nodded once. We stay until we can stand on our own ground. Red held her gaze. Then you're not alone here. Work resumed slowly at first, but soon the rhythm returned. Hammer strikes, wire tightening, boots shifting across dry grass. Something new set in the air. Not peace, not safety. Preparation. They were no longer fugitives sheltering under Red Hale's roof. They were part of this fight now, part of this land, and for the first time in a long while, Red realized he didn't mind that at all. Evening slipped across the prairie slow and steady, painting the fields in long shadows until the sky turned a cool, washed-out blue. By the time the last wire was tightened and the final post stood firm, sweat clung to every brow, and tiredness seeped into bone and muscle. Yet nobody complained. Hard work meant purpose. Purpose meant belonging. And belonging, that was a new kind of hope for all three sisters when they returned to the cabin. Smoke lifted from the chimney, carrying the warm scent of beans simmering on the stove. Red stirred the pot, glancing toward the doorway every few moments. He wasn't used to cooking for anyone besides himself, and he caught himself listening not for danger, but for the quiet sound of people washing up outside, rinsing dust from their arms at the barrel near the porch. Something tugged at him. It had been years since another human voice filled this place. Years since his home held more than one heartbeat. A thought crept in. Could he trust them fully? Or they him? He knew someone listening might wonder the same. Red had already thought it through. He kept a rifle behind the cabin door, a pistol near his bed, and his father's old shotgun high on the shelf. He hadn't hidden any of it from the sisters. Secrets bred fear, and fear could break fragile ground. When Asha, Talia, and Nomi stepped inside to the warmth, their eyes naturally drifted toward the weapons. Asha looked at them first, then, slowly, at Red. He responded with a simple nod. No apology, no threat. Protection, his expression said. That's all. Asha's gaze softened. She nodded back, barely visible but full of meaning. A silent agreement. Dinner felt different than their first night. Yesterday they ate like people starved. Tonight, they ate like they believed morning would come without a fight. Nomi sat closest to the fire, steam rising from her bowl. She ate small bites, still careful, but more trusting. When Red passed the bread toward her, she didn't withdraw or wait for permission. She accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you." Talia kept her back straight, eyes flicking occasionally toward the window, but her shoulders didn't hold quite as much tension. It was a subtle shift, but Red saw it. Trust wasn't built in one day, yet something was forming here, slow, honest, and steady. Asha sat across from Red. She didn't look away when he spoke. Her posture still poised, still guarded, held something else now, readiness. Not to flee, to build. When the bowls were empty, Red cleared the table. Asha wiped down the wood. Talia swept the floor with quiet determination. Nomi rinsed spoons at the basin, humming something faint under her breath before catching herself and falling silent. But she hadn't hummed at all yesterday. That mattered. At last, Nomi turned, glancing around the cabin. Where we sleep? In barn again? Her voice didn't hold fear, just uncertainty. Red answered without hesitation. Inside. The relief hit her so fast she nearly masked it by fixing her blanket. Talia's spine went rigid, not from fear, but habit. Sleeping close meant vulnerability, but she didn't argue. Asha waited for instructions, poised like someone who had been responsible too long to relax without direction. Red set out 3 bedrolls near the hearth. I'll sleep by the door. You'll be safe here. Talia eyed him sharply. You trust us? Near your weapons? Red met her stare without wavering. I trust myself to know a good choice when I make it. For a brief second, just a second, Talia's tough exterior cracked. Respect flickered there. She covered it fast, but Red caught it. As night took over, the fire softened from bright orange to a low red glow. One by one, they settled into their blankets. Talia kept her knife under her coat. Asha lay closest to the fire, hair loose, unbraided for the first time since arriving. Nomi curled between them, letting out a small sigh when warmth reached her bones. Red stretched out near the door, rifle in arm's reach. He listened to the rhythm of breathing inside the cabin, gentle, steady. Something he hadn't heard in years. It felt unfamiliar, but somehow right. Ash's whisper drifted across the room. Why you live alone? Red stared at the ceiling for a moment. Some truths needed space before they surfaced. War took more from me than I expected, he finally said. Didn't want crowds. Didn't want noise. Didn't want questions. He didn't say the rest didn't want to watch anyone else suffer again. But the silence filled it in. Asha nodded once, eyes reflecting the firelight. We understand war, Talia added from her side, voice low. Peace is harder. The simplicity of the truth sat between them. After a few breaths, Red asked the question someone listening might wonder too. Did you have someone before? Someone waiting? A husband? Ash's fingers tightened slightly on her blanket. I was promised once, she said quietly. But he sold us. When time's hard. She didn't look embarrassed, just honest. Talia's voice followed. Sharp but not unkind. Family not always means safety, Nomi echoed softly, barely awake. Here. Feel not bad. It wasn't gratitude. It was hope. Fragile but real. Silence filled the cabin again, but not the dangerous kind. Warm silence. The kind that comes when fear finally lets go of your throat. Asha didn't lie down immediately. She sat with her knees tucked to her chest, watching Red carefully. You say we not earn safety, she whispered. But we help anyway. Red turned his head. Work isn't about earning your right to be safe. It's about building something. Ash's voice trembled just a little. What we build here. He held her gaze. A life that doesn't run. Her breath caught. She lay down slowly, pulling the blanket to her chin. For the first time since arriving, she slept without her boots on. Red watched the firelight flicker across her face. Watched her eyes finally close without fear. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more work, more danger. But tonight, for people breathed under the same roof with no one running and no one hurting each other. Sometimes, the beginning of a home didn't announce itself. Sometimes, it arrived quietly in the dark, when the fire burned low and the world finally let you rest. Morning crept into the cabin gently, a thin wash of gold sliding across the floorboards. It touched Ash's cheek first, softening the lines of exhaustion. Then it brushed across Talia's back, the hand she still kept near her hidden knife even in sleep. Finally, the light reached Nomi, curled between her sisters. One hand fisted around the blanket like she feared it might vanish if she loosened her grip. Red woke before the sun fully rose. Habit, instinct, and a soldier's leftover vigilance. He pushed himself upright slowly, careful not to wake them. His muscles protested from sleeping on the floor, but his mind sharpened the second he stood. Supplies were running thin. Flour nearly gone, salt low. Coffee beans at the bottom of the sack. Ammunition enough for trouble, but not enough for real trouble. He didn't like the thought forming in his mind, but he couldn't avoid it. He needed to go to town, and he hated that idea. He stepped outside quietly, letting the cold morning air clear his head. Frost clung to the yard like a thin white blanket. The horses snorted softly, stamping hooves, their breath clouding into pale ghosts in the cold. Red scanned the ridge, saw nothing, heard nothing. Still, he didn't feel easy inside the cabin. The sisters began stirring at the smell of coffee drifting from the stove. Nomi blinked awake first, rubbing her eyes with small, childlike motions. Talia stretched necks, stiff but alert within seconds. Asha rose last, brushing her hair from her face. Eyelids still heavy with the rare taste of real rest. She looked around the cabin slowly, eyes searching for something danger or reassurance. Red couldn't tell before she had to ask. He spoke. After breakfast, you can walk the land, learn it. You're free to move here same as me. He met Ash's gaze pointedly. You're not locked away. Something shifted in her posture. A silent breath of relief, or perhaps recognition this place wasn't a prison. Breakfast was simple eggs and leftover beans, but it felt different. They ate without rushing, without fear clawing at their throats. Nomi even asked questions. What plants grow here? Where water lines go? Coyote live near ridge. Her voice was still small, but steadier. Talia's questions were sharper. Where rattlesnakes hide? What signals a rider coming fast? Where rifle shells stored? Practical, protective, prepared. Asha listened to every answer like she was mapping the land onto her very bones, judging how much of their fate this ranch could carry. after they cleaned dishes. Red handed gloves to Asha and Talia. "We start with the horses," he said. Talia raised a brow. "We ride." "Not today," Red replied. "First you learn them. Horses read people better than most men." Talia smirked dryly. "Like us." Red's mouth twitched into the ghost of a smile. "Something like that." Asha stepped closer. "We know horses some. Not saddle. More leading. That's a good start." They walked to the corral, where the sun was climbing brighter now, warming dust and wooden rails. The horses paced, ears flicking at the new voices. Red showed them where the brushes hung, how to move slow and steady so the animals didn't spook, how to speak in calm tones so the horses felt the rhythm of their breath. Asha moved with a natural gentleness, hand along a horse's neck, voice low and sure. The horse leaned into her touch like it recognized something soft it missed. Talia approached stiffly. She didn't trust animals she couldn't predict, but when the horse accepted her hand, her entire face shifted just briefly. A rare peace blossomed there, then hid again behind her guard. Red noticed. He didn't comment. Nomi hesitated the longest. She stood outside the rail, hands clenched, fear tugging her backward. Red crouched beside her. "Put your hand here." He guided her gently. "Slow. Breathe with him." Nomi held her breath, then exhaled, placing her small hand on the horse's shoulder. The horse sniffed her, then settled. Nomi's wide-eyed wonder was almost childlike. It like me," she whispered. Red felt something tighten in his chest, not romance, not obligation, but a protective ache. She'd seen too much fear for someone so young. Moments like this mattered. Morning stretched into afternoon. They brushed horses, lifted hooves, learned to tie knots. Sweat built, arms ached, but no one complained. Work wasn't punishment, it was grounding. During a water break, Asha asked quietly, "How long we stay here?" Red wiped sweat from his brow. "As long as you need." Talia snorted. "Danger always out there." Red shrugged. "Then stay as long as you want." The effect of those words hit all three differently. Nomi's eyes softened, like hope stepped inside her chest and finally found a seat. Talia looked away sharply, swallowing something thick. Asha didn't smile, but her gaze deepened, steadier, holding Red's without flinching. This wasn't temporary. This was the start of a life they didn't dare imagine. By late afternoon, wind picked up, dust swirling across the prairie. They returned to the cabin tired, dusty, but with a kind of satisfaction stitched into their bones. Inside, Asha stirred stew with careful hands. Talia sharpened a kitchen blade, slow strokes, focused. Nomi stacked firewood by the hearth, humming again, louder this time. Red fixed a loose hinge on the window. Routine, rhythm, a kind of peace that had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with trust. As dusk fell, Asha handed Red a bowl of stew, not placed on the table, handed to him. Their fingers brushed, rough skin against steady warmth. Asha pulled back, not startled, just aware. Red's breath came quieter, but he didn't look away. Talia saw it. Her eyes narrowed, not jealousy, but analysis, evaluating, measuring, approving or disapproving. Red couldn't tell. After dinner, night settled over them like a thick blanket. Coyotes yipped in the distance. The fire crackled. The cabin glowed soft. Red leaned by the window. Talia polished her knife, but didn't grip it with fear. Nomi hummed by the fire. Asha watched the kettle steam, silence deep but comfortable. Finally, Red spoke. "Tomorrow, we check the north fence. After that, we'll ride down by the creek." Then he paused. "I'll need to go to town soon." All three sisters went still. "You stay here," Red continued. "All of you." Talia frowned. "Town dangerous." Red nodded. "I know. That's why I go." Asha crossed her arms, cautious. "What if men follow you back?" "I'll lead them wrong," Red said simply. "And I'll come back safe?" Nomi looked up at him, voice soft. "You always come back." Red met her gaze, then Talia's, then Asha's. "I don't leave people I take responsibility for." It wasn't romance. It wasn't a vow. But it meant more. By the time they lay down to sleep again, the cabin felt changed. Not a refuge, not a hiding place, a home learning to breathe. And as Red watched the fire fade, one truth settled into him like a final nail hammered straight. He didn't come to this land to build a life with anyone, but now Somehow, this was the only life he wanted to protect. Dawn arrived with a pale yellow sky, the kind that made the prairie look both peaceful and on edge. Red woke first, as always. His joints ached from another night on the floor, but he didn't move right away. He sat there, boots half-laced, watching the three women breathe steadily in the shifting morning light. They had slept here twice now, and each night they had breathed easier. But today would not be an easy day. Supplies were running low. Trouble was circling. Choices had to be made. Red stood, pulled on his coat, and stepped outside. Cold air hit him, crisp and sharp. He walked the perimeter of the yard, eyes searching the far ridge. Nothing but open land and early light. Still, his jaw stayed tight. Something in the wind felt tense, like the ground itself was listening. Inside, Asha stirred awake first. One look at Red tying his coat told her everything. "You go today," she said quietly. No fear in her tone, just recognition. Red nodded. Talia sat up next, rubbing her eyes before pulling her knife from under her coat. "We handle ourselves," she muttered. But the stiff way she held her shoulders betrayed the truth. She didn't like the idea of him leaving. Not because she doubted herself, but because the world outside the cabin had already taken too much from them. Nomi sat up last, blankets still around her, eyes wide and unsure. Red added wood to the fire, then turned to face them. "I'll be back by sundown. Don't open the door unless you hear my voice." He paused, thinking. "Keep the barn latched. If riders come too close, get inside and stay low." Talia's eyes flicked to the rifle near the window. "You trust us with guns? I trust you to protect yourselves if you have to." Talia straightened slightly. It wasn't pride. It was respect, rare from her, and earned. Red looked at Nomi, whose hands trembled just a little. "I don't fight," she whispered. "You don't need to," Red said gently. He crouched in front of her. "You listen. You stay inside. And you trust your sisters." Nomi nodded, swallowing hard. Red strapped his gun belt tight, lifted his coat collar, and stepped toward the door. "I'll come back," he said simply. Talia didn't look away. Men promise many things. Red held her gaze. "I don't say what I don't mean." That was enough for her. She nodded once. By the time the sun touched the tops of the low hills, Red rode out, dust rising behind him, coat flapping in the wind. He didn't look back. He didn't have to. Inside the cabin, silence filled the space like an unwelcome guest. Asha stood still for a long time, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Then she snapped it off and said, almost harshly, "We not hide all day. Fear grow big if we feed it." Talia smirked faintly. "Then we work." They moved through the morning with the ease of people used to carrying their own survival. Asha cleaned and tended the fire. Talia walked the barn, fed the horses, and checked the fence lines with sharp eyes. Nomi scrubbed the table, folded blankets, and hummed quietly. Her voice just barely loud enough to be heard her still. Every shift in the wind made them lift their heads. Every bird call sharpened their ears. Safety was a fragile thing, and they felt the cracks everywhere. By midday, they were outside chopping root vegetables stored in the earth shed. The sun warmed their backs. Chickens clucked lazily nearby. For a moment, peace felt possible. Then Nomi froze. "Horse," she whispered. Talia's hand shot to her knife. Asha stepped forward, eyes narrowing toward the road. Dust rose. A rider approached, but not toward them. He passed straight by, heading toward a distant ranch. A male runner, harmless. The three women exhaled in sync. Asha's voice came quiet but strong. "Fear not weakness. Fear tell you what matter." Talia wiped sweat from her forehead. Everything mattered now. The hours crawled. Work helped, but thoughts kept drifting to Red. In town, was he safe? Would someone question him? Would the wrong man recognize his horse or follow his trail? Would the buyer, the one who'd tried to claim them, be there? Out here, a lie could save or destroy. By late afternoon, the sisters were outside near the porch. Asha wiping her hands, Talia stacking wood, Nomi laying vegetables out to dry. Then they heard it, hoof beats. This time closer, slow, heavy. Not passing by, not drifting, coming straight for them. Asha's spine went rigid. Talia's grip tightened around her knife. Nomi flinched behind her sisters, breath stuttering. A single horse approached the gate. Not rushing, Not wondering. Deliberate. Asha whispered sharply. Inside. They moved fast and quiet. Talia grabbed the rifle near the door. Asha shot the bolt across the cabin. Nomi crouched behind the stove, breath shaky. Hoofbeats stopped outside. Silence. Then, it's me. Red's voice. Ash's breath left her chest like she'd been punched. She unbolted the door carefully and cracked it open. Red swung down from the saddle, dust covering his coat, a heavy sack tied behind him. He looked tired, sharp, watchful. Talia lowered the rifle, pretending she hadn't been worried. You late. Red brushed past her with a calm voice. Trouble in town. We'll talk inside. He tied off his horse and entered the cabin. Nomi stood up fast, eyes scanning his face. You okay? Red nodded once. I'm back. That's what matters. Asha folded her arms. Town see you? Town always sees, he answered, jaw tight. But they didn't follow. Talia stepped closer. What happened? Red looked at each of them before speaking, voice low and steady. A group of men asking about Apache women. One of them said he's owed property. Used those exact words. Nomi flinched. Ash's fingers curled hard. Talia's jaw cracked from how tight she said it. Red continued. Sheriff stood between us. Didn't like their talk. But trouble's moving. They're not letting this go. Silence fell. Heavy, but not hopeless. Asha nodded once. Then we ready. Red removed his hat. His voice softened, not weak, but resolute. Whatever comes, we stand together. No one argued. No one backed away. The decision was already made. Outside, dusk spread across the land. Inside, the cabin warmed with firelight and determination. They were done running. And whatever waited on the horizon, they'd face it as one. Night pressed heavy against the cabin walls, thicker than the cold itself. Even the fire seemed to burn quieter, as if it understood the weight sitting in the room. Red sat at the table, oiling the rifle piece by piece, every motion slow and deliberate. Across from him, Talia sharpened her knife even though the blade no longer needed it. Her hands needed the rhythm, more than the steel did. Asha stitched the last tear in Nomi's dress, her fingers steady, but her shoulders drawn tight. Nomi sat closest to the fire, staring into the flames with a fixed, heavy gaze. Red finally broke the silence, his voice low. 3 men asked round the saloon, looking for runaways. One said money's owed. They're searching every ranch from here to the river. Asha froze mid-stitch. Talia's hand paused. Nomi's breath caught. Sheriff told them he won't tolerate hunting people in his town. Red continued. But law only stretches so far. Out here, we're on our own. Talia snorted softly. Law ends where prairie starts. Red nodded. That's why we prepare. Not a declaration of war, just a statement of fact. Preparation on the frontier wasn't loud. It was quiet, sharp, practical. It meant knowing where ammunition sat, knowing who kept watch and where the shadows fell, knowing what tools doubled as weapons. It meant tightening every seam in life so nothing slipped through. He set the rifle aside. Tomorrow morning we secure the horses in the corral and bring feed closer. We stack firewood along the porch. No one goes out alone. And if riders appear, we see them before they see us. Asha nodded. Talia didn't argue. Nomi swallowed and whispered, We not run this time. You won't have to, Red replied. The next morning arrived clean and harsh bright sun. Bone-dry air, not a cloud in sight. The kind of day where everything was visible and nothing could hide. They worked fast and quietly. Asha carried feed sacks to the barn. Talia built a makeshift barricade from scrap planks. Red reinforced the doors and windows. Nomi filled water buckets and placed them within reach. Every so often, Asha would pause, scanning the horizon with a gaze that had learned danger too young. She didn't shiver. She didn't run. She watched. Fear didn't control her. Fear taught her. At noon, they sat to eat bread and reheated stew. It wasn't much, but it filled empty stomachs and steadied nerves. Red noticed Nomi eyeing the rifle by the wall. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, because she hated feeling helpless. He moved beside her quietly. You don't need to shoot, he said gently. I need not freeze, she whispered. He held out a small knife. Start here. You don't fight with it. You hold it to remember you're not powerless. Nomi took it in both hands. Exhaling a shaky breath, dignity settling into her fingers, Asha watched Red with a small, approving nod. Talia pretended not to look at all. Late afternoon arrived with a sudden shift in the wind. Birds that had been pecking near the corral lifted fast into the sky. The horses raised their heads, ears pricked toward the east. Every instinct in Red's body went rigid. He didn't speak. He just grabbed the rifle. Asha moved silently to the wall. Talia stepped to the window, peering through a narrow crack. Nomi crouched low behind the stacked wood, gripping her knife tight. Hoof beats, not hurried, not wandering. Purposeful. Two riders appeared on the rise, dust trailing behind them. They didn't ride along, they rode toward Red's land. Red stepped onto the porch. He didn't look back. He already knew they'd follow his lead. The riders stopped at the gate, faces twisted with the confidence of men who believed cruelty was justified. "Evenin', rancher," the lead man called. "Heard some girls run through here. Thought we might take a look around." Red didn't blink. "I don't entertain rumors." The second rider leaned forward. "Someone in town said you've been talking to Apache folk." "That's so," Red said. "MHM." The first man grinned thinly. "We don't want trouble. Just taking back property." Red's voice dropped to steel. "People aren't property." Dust rolled across the yard. Inside the door frame, Ash's fingers flexed around her knife. Talia's stare turned colder than metal. Nomi pressed her back to the wall, steadying her breath. The rider smiled like a man who thought pain was a lesson. "Someone always owns women like that." "You're mistaken," Red said, voice calm but sharp. "Nobody here belongs to you. Mind if we look around?" "Yes," Red answered. Silence. Then Red raised the rifle a few inches, not aiming. "Just declaring the line. You turn your horses around," he said. Now, the men exchanged a look. They weren't used to being denied, especially not by one quiet rancher standing alone. "Be careful picking sides," one muttered. "Ain't wise to fight for what you can't keep." Red didn't flinch. "I keep what I protect." Several long seconds pressed into the air. Then the riders yanked their reins hard and turned away. Not defeated, not finished, just waiting for reinforcements. Red didn't lower the rifle until they were specks on the horizon. Asha stepped onto the porch. "They come back," she said softly. "Yes," Red answered. "They will." Talia moved beside him, fierce and unyielding. "Next time more, likely," Red admitted. Nomi stepped forward, not hiding now, voice trembling but sure. "We not leave." Red looked at all three of them, and he understood the truth in their eyes. Fear existed, but resolve lived louder. "No," he said. "We don't run anymore." Asha moved closer, shoulder almost touching his. Talia stood to his other side, chin lifted. Nomi stood behind them, small but strong, for people. One line, the sun dipped low, casting a fierce orange light across the yard. It made their shadows long united, unbroken. They didn't speak more. They didn't need to. Danger had come and found something unexpected waiting. Not victims, not fugitives, a beginning worth fighting for. Morning came without softness. 6 riders approached the gate. Red stepped out onto the porch first, rifle in hand. Asha, Talia, and Nomi stood behind him, not cowering, not hiding, standing. "You sure you wanted to do this?" the lead rider called. "No sense dying over property." "There's no property here," Red replied. "Only free people." Asha stepped half beside him. "We not belong to you. Contract says otherwise." "Then contract dies today," Red said. The man smiled. "You can't protect them. I only need to protect them today." Talia whispered sharply. "We stand with you." Red lifted the rifle slowly. The riders sneered. "He won't shoot." Red fired, straight into the dirt in front of their horses. The ground shattered. Horses reared. Men swore. Red lowered the rifle. "I don't warn twice." Something shifted in the riders' faces. They saw 3 women who weren't broken. One man who wasn't bending. The leader spat. "You'll regret this." "Not today," Red said. And they rode off, angry, frustrated, unwilling to lose what pride they had left. Red didn't lower the rifle until dust swallowed them whole. Asha let out a long breath. Not fear release. Talia smiled, small but real. Nomi blinked back, tears relief, not terror. "You're safe now," Red said softly. Asha touched his arm. fingers trembling just once. "You not run. You not break. Neither did you," he replied. Their eyes held not romance, but something stronger and quieter. A choice, a beginning. Talia rolled her eyes, but the grin she hid behind her hand betrayed her. Nomi giggled light, hopeful. Free. Red set the rifle down. "You're home now," he said. "All three of you. No one takes that from us." The prairie wind swept across the land, not threatening now, just moving through the open space like a promise finally kept. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. They didn't make dramatic speeches. They just stood together, for people who had chosen one another and fought for the right to stay. And as sunlight rose steady across the fence line and the cabin roof, the silence didn't feel dangerous anymore. It felt like the start of a life no one would have believed they'd ever get. It felt like a beginning,